The US government, a massive economic and military superpower, has fallen into the hands of some of the most dangerous psychopaths in history. Will mankind get out of this one alive? Let's talk. Hello, hello, Garland Nixon here, and another interesting talk. And I think it is uh I don't know, positive maybe, but whatever the case may be, let's talk about the dynamics that humankind is facing for this reason. If we are straightforward about this thing, what are we up against? It's clear. That is that ever since the mankind invented a suicide pill called nuclear weapons, we have the shadow of an Armageddon style war looming over the planet, right? Ever since that happened, the potential was there. And the potential grew exponentially with the invention of even more powerful weapons. So now, at any time, we have a species that can annihilate itself. And if we are honest about probabilities, right? If we are honest about probabilities, we would have to say that if you look at the size of the universe, there is no size to the universe. So the probabilities to me say that this is not the first time this has happened in the universe. The probabilities to me are this has happened before, probably many, many, many times, and it's gone in many, many different directions. I mean, if you think about it, I'll just take a couple seconds to say this. Just think about this for a second. There was something called I believe it was called the dark field or the something field. Basically, what happened was they used the Hubble telescope or one of these powerful telescopes. And what they did was they focused it on this tiny, tiny black spot in the sky, right? Think about the universe. I mean, the telescope goes around and around the earth, and in all directions there's sky, there's blackness, there's stars, there's universes, all the things that these powerful telescopes can see. So what they decided was to take one little black area, just a tiny little dot, and to focus the telescope in that tiny dot of all of the directions it could focus in, the trillions of the uncountable number of directions you could have focused that telescope on going around the earth. They took one little tiny dot of the sky where they had looked in there and never saw anything. It's like, that is nothing. If you look out there, there's nothing there. That's a blank spot in the universe, whatever the case may be, like an eighth of an inch spot. And they focused the universe, focused the telescope, the Hubble, I believe it was, for months and months and months in that one tiny spot to say, we're not going to see anything. It's just a tiny spot of blackness in the middle of nowhere, but we'll just keep looking in that spot. And so they focused, and the telescope kept gathering light from that spot, gathering light from that spot, gathering light from that spot, right? So eventually they said, all right, let's see what we got. They found like 10,000 universes, 10,000 uncountable thousands of universes. They took a tiny, 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 minuscule spot of blackness in the middle of the sky, and they found tens of thousands of universes. So what does that tell us? That tells us that the universe is uncountable, in the same way that the Hindus in Sanskrit, they have a word that basically means non-dual, right? When they talk about a God, it means non-dual. It means not one, not many. Basically, it's an admission that human language cannot say what God or gods would be, because our languages try to interpret reality. Reality is not one, reality is not many, right? So if I say there was 10,000 universes, that implies that numbers apply to the universe, which it doesn't. So here's my point. That means that anything you could possibly think of, every scenario you could possibly dream of, has happened. because of the sheer numbers and probabilities. So this has happened and will happen again, and species have destroyed themselves and species have gotten through it and are still around, right? Okay. As evidenced, I might add, by the recent UFO files. Look at them. Look at them. Something's up. I don't know what it is. I have no idea, but it's interesting, the stuff that came out of the Pentagon. All that, I say all that to say this. Why did I get into UFOs and Hubble telescopes and things of that nature? Because that tells me that the odds are that we could wipe ourselves out, and the odds are that we could survive. So let's talk about an odds, a possibility or probability that exists in which we survive. Let's talk about that. 'Cause what's the point talking about? Let me put it to you like this. Ain't nobody watching this going to survive. Nobody, none of us. Some of us will be scared to death. Oh my gosh, I'm afraid I'm going to die in a nuclear Armageddon, and then walk down the stairs, slip on a banana peel, and break our necks. Some of them will live to be 84, 94, maybe 104. We're all out of here at some point. So to guess when, who'd want to know? Who would want to know if you're like, I wonder when I'm going to die, and all of a sudden, some genie comes and says you're going to die May 14th, 2027. You'd be, crap. I don't want to know that, right? So I say all that to see, to start off philosophically saying, what's the point of worrying about when you're going to croak? That's a given from the day you were born. So there's no point losing sleep all night. Oh my gosh, I'm going to die. Are we going to get nuked, or are we going to get out of here at some point? Here's my point. I studied Zen, and what I learned in Zen is the only thing you got is right now. By the time I say the word now, by the time I get it out of my mouth, I'm not there anymore. So the only thing you really have is that. So be not afraid, my dear friends. Do not worry about nuclear Armageddon, or slipping on a banana peel, or breaking your neck, or getting cancer, or dying suddenly, or things of that nature. Enjoy your life right now. And that's what we're going to do. After all of that, it took me 7 minutes to say, let's get on this thing. All right. What we're talking about here is this. Don't try to play a symphony and a concert for people that are deaf. You're wasting your time, right? There are things you can do for them. You can bring them to an art museum, and they can enjoy beautiful art, but the symphony ain't going to happen, right? There's certain things. Don't read poetry to Garland Nixon. For some reason, I don't know why, the way my brain works, I read poetry and I'm like, I don't get it. It's not that I don't think it's beautiful to a lot of people. I don't get it, right? So just not the way I'm not with that kind of art. I'm not good with it, right? Interpretive things. God only knows what it means. But so I'm not going to try to explain things to people that will come on and say, you're just a Putin puppet. If you don't understand it, here's what we're up against. This is clear. For those of you who have never looked it up, look up something called the Wolfowitz Doctrine. What we're dealing with is this. The U.S. empire, and it is an empire. I've heard people say, people that I agree with on a lot of things say it's not an empire. They got 850 bases. An empire is like an octopus. You have the body of the octopus, the mouth of the octopus, the tentacles go out in all other directions, grab things and drag them into the middle, and into the mouth they go for consumption. That's kind of what an empire is. An empire is expansive by its very nature. It's always trying to grab new territories, grab new resources. It has to. It's the only way it survives, because an empire is predatory. It doesn't try to exist along with other things. It is predatory. It is parasitical by nature. No way around it. That's what an empire is. The U.S. is an empire. The empires and empires have a life cycle. They have a lifespan, and the U.S. empire is nearing the end of its lifespan. And there's a number of things that affect the lifespan of an empire. And interestingly enough, and I think it's important to have this talk for where we're going. Interestingly enough, the U.S. empire, because of technology, my dad used to, he was an old country guy, and he used to say, same thing will make you laugh, will make you cry, right? The old country people have great sayings, right? Some of you don't even understand. You can't cook a swan and eat goose. I never figured that one out. But the same thing will make you laugh and make you cry makes sense, right? So technology had this effect on the U.S. empire. Let me put it to you like this. I knew a guy when I first retired from law enforcement. I did sales. I had I like to use analogies a lot, so forgive me if you hate analogies. I knew a guy who was in his 50s, and I'm not going to mention his name. Hopefully, he's still alive, but I don't know. And when I talked to this guy, good-looking guy in a wheelchair, and when I talked to him, what I found out was this. I was doing at the time, I was doing medical insurance stuff. Like I had my medical insurance licenses, a bunch of insurance licenses for a couple of years. I did that. And what I found out from this dude was he lived a fast life. When he was young, he chased the babes, he smoked a lot of weed, he snorted a lot of coke, he went to the bars, he went to the clubs, he had fast cars, he lived a fast life. And he just said, man, I had a blast. You got to be kidding me. He said, people would want my life if they knew how I lived. And he went on and on and on and on, right? And what he said was this, very interesting. Look, it's kind of like a candle. He saw life like this. Some people want to burn a candle real fast and, burn it real hot, and then the candle's gone, and that's their choice. Some people want a nice, slow burning candle, right? You got some people who want to take it easy and slow, and they want their candle to burn slow. He said, I chose to burn mine fast. He said, 150 years from now, what difference does it make? He said, the people that live for 55 years will be dead. The people that live for 95 years will be dead. It was just a choice. And I thought to myself, in my initial thought was to judge him and say, man, you snorted coke, you drank a lot of liquor, you did all these other things, right? And here you are 55 and your life is, you've worn yourself out, right? And then when I thought about what he said, I thought, philosophically speaking, there's logic to it. 150 years from now, Garland Nixon, who, don't get me wrong, in my younger years, I chased the babes, I went to the clubs, I drove the sports cars, I did that stuff, but I wasn't into the coke and stuff like that, right? And I didn't drink, a lot of liquor and all that kind of, that end of it. And, I think that's what kind of took him down. And I would be surprised if he was still around today, because that was like 2000 and maybe 2009. Yeah, he's still around, but hopefully he is. So anyway, but my point to all of this is, it was a choice. Do you burn it up fast? Do you slow walk it and maybe hopefully live longer? I mean, one guy can do everything that this guy did and go crossing the street and somebody, is texting on their phone and runs them over and he dies the same. So you can't prepare, or he gets some disease and dies anyway. You can't prepare. Who knows? But you can affect the probabilities. Okay. Here's my point on that. Empires have a lifespan and they're usually maybe hundreds of years or whatever. Technology has changed that. What the computer age did, what the technological age did, I believe, is dramatically sped up the lifespan of the empire, so that the people in the empire could live faster. They could burn that thing up faster. They could grab. They could do, and the empire could go out now. Now, wherein the Roman Empire had to take armies and march forever, and they to get 100 miles. Trust me, you didn't get in a transport plane and a helicopter and cover 100 miles. Slowly, the empire expanded, and slowly it came back and fell apart. Now that there's a technology, old empires couldn't build 850 bases around the earth because they didn't have planes and all. So the U.S. rapidly expanded because of technology. But some other things happened. The people of the empire and the people of the world, whereas before, when your empire did something horrible, nobody knew about it. And you just talked about how wonderful the Roman or Ottoman or Greek or Austro-Hungarian, whatever empire was. And people didn't know the horrible things you were doing, didn't know what was going on. Nobody could judge you because they didn't know. Now it goes on Twitter right away and people know. So the knowledge sped up, and the knowledge around the world sped up, and the distaste for empire grew, right? I would argue that when the U.S. empire falls, it's going to be hard for another empire to rise up and take its place because of technology and the knowledge that people have. Now let's go on. Let's move on with this. Something else happened, and this was a wake-up call to me. One of the things I recall, and this wasn't the beginning of it, but this is a great example of it. the U.S. has this powerful military, right? And it can go around the world and do whatever it wants. Remember the Iraq War, where the U.S. showed now. That's when they showed off. I remember they showed videos of being able to put a bomb in a window, these smart bombs. Well, basically, they drop a bomb and the bomb, it had fins that move so you could kind of guide it. And the computer, they'd use a computer and laser or target something, and they'd guide this thing with its fins kind of free falling right into wherever. And then missiles came up that were more accurate, and GPS and all computers and all these things. So now the US empire says we will rule everything easily because we got all this technology, but they ain't the only ones. The Iranians are pretty smart too. I don't know if you're familiar with the Iranians, but when you start looking at the science, these are the people who invented calculus, the people who win these science fairs, and kids that win these science fairs around the world oftentimes are Iranian. The Iranians are not to be trifled with. So what are the Iranians doing? They're using technology. They're buying some of it from North Korea. They're doing other things, right? And what do? They build these very powerful ballistic missiles and build a lot of them. And one thing that I thought was interesting, I'll throw that out there, was when it was kind of a wake-up call. When the U.S. killed Soleimani, right? And the Iranians said, we're going to retaliate. And they did. And they used these ballistic missiles. And they told the U.S. that the ballistic missiles were coming, and the U.S. couldn't stop them. Couldn't stop them. They've got like missiles that fly low off the ground. They hug the terrain. They take circuitous routes. They go through valleys. They go, they avoid your radar. They do all this kind of stuff. And the bottom line, when you see that missile, is when you hear a boom. And when the U.S., the Trump team talked about retaliating, we've got to attack Iran. And just before that, the Iranians had shot down a U.S. drone and kind of demonstrated they've got their own, homegrown air defense system. And something became obvious. And that was, you ain't the only one with technology. And the cover story, right? The esoteric story is the interior story, the exoteric story being the cover story, the outside story. The exoteric story was Trump was ready to attack Iran, and 10 minutes before they got ready to strike, he said no. That was, from what I understand, my sources tell me that wasn't true. My sources tell me that what happened was there was a discussion about it, and what Trump was told and what the people were told by the military, by intelligence, is, look, if you attack Iran, they have the potential with their ballistic missiles to flatten every U.S. base in the Middle East. Flatten every one. And ain't nothing we can do to stop it. They can flatten Saudi's infrastructure. Let me just throw this in. Let's not forget the Houthis. Who knows where they might have gotten their drones and missiles? And they had the simple stuff. Were able to continuously hit Saudi's oil infrastructure with U.S. Patriot missiles there to defend it. Couldn't stop them. Do all kinds of damage. So the bottom line was this. If you hit them, we might take a punch that we can't absorb. Then what do? Do we nuke Iran right on Russia's border, and the nuclear fallout ends up all over Israel, Russia, Pakistan, Egypt, Africa? Do we nuke the region? Maybe even into the sea. Maybe it hits something in drip. We don't know where that nuclear cloud and nuclear dust ends, and you kill millions of people. Is that what you want to do? You want to start a nuclear war because you've attacked them and they flattened every damn one of your bases in the region? And maybe Israel too. Is that what you want? And they wiped out closed the Straits of Hormuz, wiped out the entire oil infrastructure, and you have detonated a nuclear weapon on your economy. Is that what you want to do over a couple of ballistic missiles, a demonstration of power by Iran? And the answer was no. But what did it show? It showed now that the end of the empire is near, because what technology has done is the U.S. has all this technology, but it has leveled the playing fields, where now potential adversaries have the technology to hit you, and ain't a damn thing you can do about it. The U.S. is clearly on the side of Saudi Arabia. They put They put these Patriot missiles in Saudi Arabia to protect Saudi Arabia's oil fields, and the Houthis knocked the hell out of these oil fields anyway with slow, low-flying drones. Imagine that. These things, see, these Patriot defensive things, and the U.S. air stuff is set up for like high-flying jets. You got something that's low and slow, doesn't know it from a flock of birds. And in it comes kablooey. So the idea that you're going to put Patriot missiles in Ukraine and they're going to somehow stop the Russian whatever, yeah, you keep dreaming. Again, it's a technology issue. So you see where I'm going with this. Where I'm going with this is two things. Technology has sped up the life cycle of an empire. That's number one, this particular empire. Number two, and that is that the adversaries of the empire have caught and in some areas passed and in some areas lapped the empire when it comes to technology. Hypersonic missiles, you got nothing. We've got the Admiral Gorshkov now, a ship by the Russians that is out there. The first ship loaded. It's got 16 tubes, at least 2 hypersonic missiles at each, 32 hypersonic missiles. You know what's going to happen with that? If it lights off, with somewhere around 1,000-mile range, you know what's going to happen with that ship if it gets pissed off and they decide to act? 32 ships. We only got 12 to 14 carriers. If it's in the area of 3 or 4 carriers, that's 3 to 4 carriers out of commission. There is no way you can a carrier. I mean, you know, carriers, any kind of ships we got, they have no defense for a hypersonic missile. So one ship, let alone a salvo, because they do calculations in salvos, you don't need a salvo if they can't even stop one. And the damage of a hypersonic missile, if it doesn't sink a carrier, it will damage it to a point where it's unusable. So the reality is, we got one ship out there. What happens now when Russia starts loading up their subs with them? And they got subs. You can find that ship and shoot it, but it's 1,000 miles out in the ocean somewhere. Even if you fire missiles at it, a lot of missiles, by the time it gets your missiles, let's say they take 20, 30 minutes to get to it. By the time they get there, it's cranked off all its missiles. It may be a suicide mission, but everything that it is fired at ain't going to be happy. Technology that's technology lapping the U.S. empire now. So now you have a country that doesn't have the volume of military hardware that you have, but what they have hits hard. You know what I mean? They don't need to hit you with a lot of punches if everyone is a knockout punch. So here's my point on that. All that is to get somewhere. All that information, I think, was important. All that background was very important to get somewhere. And that is where we are now. I was setting the foundation for an argument that we are at the end of the U.S. empire. The only question is how the world manages the end of the U.S. empire. That's why I named this, Will Putin Save the World? I could have said, will Putin and Xi save the world? For this reason, the U.S. empire, rather than go quietly into the night, rather than accept its fate, is saying, well, what we have to do, look up the Wolfowitz Doctrine. This is what got us where we are today. What the U.S. empire is saying is, rather than accept that that empires have a life cycle, we're going to try to mitigate that and try to continue on. You know what it reminds me of? This is interesting. I just popped into my head. You got these billionaires that are into transhumanism, right? And why is that? Because they feel like this. This is the perfect analogy. I'm a billionaire for the purpose of this argument. And I'm living the life. I'm at Epstein's Island. I'm flying around. I'm doing all kinds of unsavory things that I think I ought to be doing. I'm telling you to eat crickets so I can eat, steak, the whole 9 yards, right? I am living my best life, as the young people say. I don't want to die. I never want to die because this is too good. I can't accept that there's a life cycle. Think about this. I can't accept a human life cycle. Garland Nixon studies Zen, and part of studying Zen, one of the things that you do is you do this exercise where you see yourself, old and frail and on your deathbed and people around, and you go through all that, right? People around you, your loved ones, and you're laying there, and then eventually they walk away, and then eventually you expire, and then eventually you dry up and you become a skeleton, and then you turn to dust, and then the windows open and the wind blows the dust away and you go back to from whence you came, right? You do that exercise. That exercise is important because it helps to eliminate the fear of death, and it helps you to understand that this is reality, and that you have to it's not death we focus on, it's life. And you don't fear how you're going to die, you live. Animals don't die because animals don't have a word for death. They don't have a concept of death. They have a fear, but not a fear of death, because they don't have a concept of death, because there is no such thing. It is a word. Death is a noun, right? So they just live, eat grass. A lion chases them. They run over to this area. The lion doesn't get them. It gets another gazelle. They look around. They start eating grass again because I'm fine now, right? The billionaires, they're like a mini empire. They want to somehow transfer their consciousness into a computer until such time as you can build androids and things like that can feel and thought, and then they can transfer. That's really what transhumanism is about. Transfer your mind back into this thing, and what do you know? I'm now living forever in some kind of an android. Or their other thing is they're working on trying to figure out aging so they can reverse aging, and therefore, whatever the case, you don't die. That's what they're the perfect analogy for an empire. All the other empires before have died. Last time I checked with the World Health Organization statistics, the human death rate was holding at a steady 100%. And that goes the same for empires. And in the way that the billionaires are trying to mitigate the reality of life and death, the cycle of life and death, in the same way, the U.S. empire is trying to mitigate the cycle of empires, life and death. And let's face it, if nobody died, planet to get a little crowded at some point, don't you think? So let's go on. So the problem the U.S. empire has is the natural cycle is taking its place. And so the question becomes, let's get to this, it took me 27 minutes, which was perfect, to get to the foundation of this philosophical discussion. How is the natural fall of the U.S. empire managed by the rest of the world? Because the people who run the U.S. empire are not only not competent to manage it, but they are dangerous to everyone else. So the question becomes, who's going to manage it? I would argue at this point, it's Vladimir Putin, and to another extent, at the forefront of it is the leader of China, Xi Jinping. Why? Because the U.S. has determined, right? The neocons have determined the way to save the empire. The Wolfowitz doctrine is to ensure that there are no competitors, right? That what we got to do is, if anybody else would get strong enough to be adversarial to us, we must destroy them. And so in reality, what the U.S. empire wants to do is what empires want to do, but it's the final solution for empire. Naturally, other great powers are growing. The U.S. empire now says we want to snuff them all out once and for all, and control everything once and for all, and take total power now. Because think about it. If these other powers are rising, you get rid of China, you get rid of Russia, you got everything. And now the other powers that are aspirant great powers, India, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, South Africa, maybe Nigeria, maybe Brazil, maybe whoever, right? Aspiring great powers now must buckle to you because you have taken everything, and they have no alternatives. They can't say, well, I'm not going to do a deal with the U.S. empire. I'll do a deal with Russia. I'll do it with China, Saudi Arabia. Whoever want to do a damn deal with, I'll do a damn deal. You want to eliminate all of that. And now you got it all. That is the nature of a psychopath. That is the nature of the grandiosity of the psychopathic, narcissistic mind is to say, I am entitled to full power over everything, and that's my game. And that's what they're doing. So this battle, as it were, has manifested itself in a very, very small area of the planet. They are at least realistic enough to know that dying ain't no way to make a living. So that if they just go head to head with Russia, Russia's going to nuke them. They go after Russia completely, Russia's going to nuke them. They know that, and they're all going to die, and they don't want to die, which is at least an advantage to us. The whole transhumanism thing is somewhat of an advantage to us because that just shows that the demonstration of the transhumanism, again, the analogy between the billionaire who is a personal empire, who's trying to find a way to live forever. If we take that analogy and we transfer it to the physical empire of the United States that's trying to live forever, right, by eliminating its allies, I mean, its competitors, we understand they don't want a nuclear war. We understand, think about it, what the U.S. empire is doing is trying to live forever. Now, in doing that, it is increasing the speed of its decline. So there's that paradox, but that's what his plan is. So when people say they're just going to start throwing nukes and kill us all, I say, look at what they're doing. They're trying to live this empire forever in the same way that billionaires are trying to live forever, which tells me, logically speaking, could they stumble into a nuclear war? Yeah, but they don't want that. And the people that are behind the leaders are saying, yeah, do whatever you want, but don't get us killed because we're still working on this computer program over here so we can live forever. So the last thing we want you to do is nuke us so we don't live forever. Don't screw up that part of the plan. Part of the plan is we run the whole world, and so ultimately we can transhumanize into some kind of a bionic android and live forever. So keep in mind that that's part of the plan, if you would, when you start getting a little too close. That's one of the reasons why right now you're starting to hear some discussion about a way out. They're not competent to do it. They ain't competent to do it, but they're starting to discuss it because the people behind them are saying, there was an article the other day. I think it's important before I go any further. This is all important stuff. I gotta share it with you. I gotta share this with you because it's an important part of what we're talking about here. Let's look at this. Look where it is. Newsweek, mainstream media. Let's go down. Bill Gates says Ukraine war stops us from achieving developmental goals. Now, that's Bill Gates. That's woke talk. That's Bill Gates. Bill Gates can't just say, hey, it's possible that this thing's going to get us all killed. What he has to do is speak the language of the woke billionaires. Well, we've got goals of making a green earth and blah and this and that. And so therefore we want to screw up the green earth by nuking us all, right? Let's go on. Billionaire Microsoft founder and philanthropist, an Epstein Island hanger out or owner, Bill Gates believes the war in Ukraine means that the chances of meeting sustainable goals on time have been scuppered. Really? Hey, do you think if we nuke everybody and we're all dead, it'll slow up those sustainable goals a little bit? Nah, we'll be fine. Yeah, maintain course and speed, as we say in boating language. All right. Let me find it. Listen to this. So here's what he says. The war in Ukraine, this is Bill Gates, the war in Ukraine will end. I certainly understand the resources being expanded there. It's a terrible tragedy. The tragedy has huge impact on developing countries. The cost of food, fertilizer, all these things are going to kill as many people outside of Ukraine as people in Ukraine. That's Bill Gates. That is the neocon. That is the billionaire way of always saying we're doing all the things we're doing is just to help people, right? Yeah, this is going to hurt people. And I'm Bill Gates, I wouldn't want to hurt people. I'm here for the good. What about the trees? So he goes on to say, so in war, and this is the important sentence. So in war, in terms of human wasting resources to go backwards, war is top of the list. And the sooner, This is Bill Gates. The sooner we can bring it to an end, the better, right? That, my friend, is what we used to call in the legal world a clue. When Bill Gates says that, that means the billionaires are starting to think, ooh, man, nuclear war is probably going to hurt. I don't want to live in a, because people are like, hey, but they got bunkers. Come on. As was it Carl Sagan who said in a nuclear war, the living would envy the dead? Who wants to live in a bunker? You got your choice. You can live in a stinking bunker where literally the sewage goes into a repurposing facility and comes back out as water. So you live the rest of your life eating powdered eggs and drinking your own urine. That ain't no way to live. I'm sorry. I'd go out in the first blast if I had my choice. If I had to live in a bunker with these idiots. Think about it. Hey, who's in the bunker? Well, we got Gates and we got Bezos and Victoria Nuland and Jake Sullivan. You're going to be you're going to be in the bunk with them, sleeping with those people. First of all, they're going to get up in the middle of the night sometime and they're not going to be properly covered. And I'm going to turn the lights and I'm going to see like Victoria Nuland and Bill Gates walking by half naked going to the bathroom. At that point, I'm out. At that point, if there's any way for me to commit suicide, I'm doing it. I'm just going to be like, guys, I'm taking the elevator up to the surface and I'm just going for a walk. And they're going to be like, well, but Garland, if you do that, you'll be killed instantly by the radiation, or the mutants will eat you. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of the plan. I have seen something on this earth that no human ever needs to be seen. The fate that I have just suffered is far worse than death. It's time for me to move on. I'm going away, guys. I'm going away. At that point, I'm out of here. So who wants to wake up in the middle of the night and see Victoria Nuland and Bill Gates walk by half naked going to the bathroom? Not me. So no thanks. And they know it. They don't want to look at themselves. They don't even like the mirrors. They want a new body. So trust me, they ain't thrilled about living in a nuclear bunker until they die. Which, let's face it, you're getting there. How much vitamin D and sunshine are you getting? None. And you're living off of powdered everything until it runs out. And then it's Donner Pass time, my friends. Whoever's the fattest gets eaten first. No, thanks. You know, it's just like I said, what if you could calculate the day you're going to die? Well, you can't, because you're in a bunker and they say, how much food do we have? Well, we only planned for 50 people in this bunker, but we have, looks like we got 187 who made it in. What does that mean? Well, we had 25 years worth of food, so we got 6 years and 7 months and 12 days, which means you now know when you're going to die. 6 months, 7 years, 6 years, 7 months, and 12 days worth of food. You will run out of food, but you'll still have enough water because you're drinking your own urine. And what do you know? At that point, you can cross out the days. That's your sentence. No thanks. I'd rather go out in the first blast. I'm just throwing that out there. That's me. Everybody chooses their own way. So my point is, I say all that to say this. So here we sit at the precipice. The United States empire decided clearly what we're going to do is we're going to surround Russia with bases. We want to take Russia eventually. They got stuff, lots of stuff that we want. We're going to go in Ukraine. They don't want us in Ukraine. That'll piss them off. Then we're going to load Ukraine up with military stuff so we can threaten them. And hopefully at some time, maybe we can either launch an attack on them, or we can get so much gear and military gear and nukes in there that they have to acquiesce to our needs. We want to press them to the point where we have our thumb on them. And then what can we do? At that point, we can cut off their lanes to the sea. You know, we can cut off their access to trade and travel bit by bit by bit, and then we can take them out. And the Russians were like, yeah, that's not happening. That's basically what happened. That's it in a nutshell. We're going to surround Russia. We're going to strangle them out. Then eventually we'll come up with an excuse. We'll cut off their trade, and then they'll give us everything we want. We'll take the country. And the Russians were like, yeah, no, well, I don't really like that plan. So let's go with this one. We're going to bomb that. We're going to blow the hell out of Ukraine if you don't get out of it. Get out, or we're kicking your ass out. That's just, let me simplify it, right? You could look at it another way. Self-defense. Putin is a martial artist. I always bring this up. I don't want any trouble. My hands are up. Back. There's a wall behind me. You have left me nowhere to retreat. I'm going to start fighting. And I'm going to hit. So now where we are is it's clear that the U.S. is so the U.S. then grabs Europe, it grabs all of its proxies, it grabs all of its schmucks and says, you guys, now we want this Ukraine thing going on, and it's going to be painful for somebody. And that somebody is you. Europe is you, because we also view you as a threat. The three big economies, the three big powerhouses economically, for a number of reasons: Russia because of its commodities, China because of its industry, and the EU because of its market and its capacity, right? Industrial and technological capacity, right? Those three got to go down. So the US is like, so we start this thing. First thing, we wipe out Europe. No matter what happens, we can't have, and they've said it over and over, we can't have Germany, an economic powerhouse and technological powerhouse, come together with Russia, because now we've got another threat to US world hegemony. Here's the difference. The Russians are smart. The German leadership, or the Germans have a quisling leadership. I'm not saying the German people are stupid. Let me change this. A lot of the German people are, I'm not intellectually stupid, but they've been so, like the American people, like us, like our people. They have been so manipulated, they have been so propagandized that they're acting in a manner that is contrary to their own needs. They've been taught that it's bad. The United States is occupying them and screwing them over, but they've been taught that the US is their friend and Russia is their enemy. The guy who is providing you cheap energy and keeping your economy going, he's your enemy. The guy who has taken your independence and sovereignty and blew the hell out of your infrastructure, that's your friend. How propagandized do you have to do to believe that? Your mind has to be turned to absolute mush to believe that. In the same way that you got Americans, after they've been watching, I mean, let me just say this. How mushed are American brains from propaganda? Here's one. We got homeless encampments all over the place. People don't have health care. They can barely buy a friggin' egg. You know, I mean, it's just a mess here, right? Not as bad as Europe, but a mess. And we've got the Democrats in Congress, two brainwashed cults. It's not like I think the Republicans are any better, but the Democrats in Congress are whining, and they literally have their followings whining along with them. You know what they're whining about? Because they lost their cushy seats on committees. So I got no food. My life's going to hell. Nuclear Armageddon, thanks to you, is looming over me. And I'm supposed to lose sleep because you're not on the Intelligence Committee anymore. Oh my God, the Republicans have thrown us off the Intelligence Committee. Let's all join hands. All you poor people, can you come and stand for us? Who's going to stand for the people, the wealthy millionaires who have lost their cushy, comfortable jobs on the Intelligence Committee? Who's going to stand for us? Yeah, certainly not the people in homeless camps with no health care and no food. So I'm just saying, don't think I'm insulting the Germans. The Americans are just as brainwashed to the point where they're acting and thinking in a manner that's contrary to their own best interests. So the difference is, at least we know, a lot of us, those who still have a brain cell, at least one left, understand that our government ain't working for us. Unfortunately, a lot of the Germans still think contrary to the statements of their own government. Annalena Baerbock, which, let me just say this, sadly, every time I write it on Twitter, my what do you call it? Autocorrect changes it to Angelina. And I end up tweeting out Angelina Baerbock. I know what her name is. Autocorrect. Thanks a lot. I think they're screwing me on purpose. But Annalena Baerbock literally said, yeah, we're going to support Ukraine. We don't care what the voters think. She literally, how brainwashed do you have to be for your government to say, I'm going to do what I want. I don't care what you think. How brainwashed do you have to be that after she says that, you still go out and grab a stinking blue and yellow flag and go marching around the street saying we must support the friggin' Nazis in Ukraine? How brainwashed you have to be? Apparently as brainwashed as a lot of people in Germany are. But it doesn't matter if they're brainwashed or not, because their government doesn't work for them. They have a quisling government. Quisling, look up the very definition of quisling government. It is traitors who side with and work for the occupiers. Is Germany occupied? You ever heard of Ramstein Air Base? It's been occupied since the 1940s. Okay. And are the governments working for, with, is the government of Germany working with, for, and collaborating with the occupiers? Does that make them traitors? I would argue yes, yes, yes. Check yes. No, check D, all of the above. So that's what the Germans are dealing with. The European countries are being sacrificed so that this billionaire owned oligarchy can make its effort to last forever. So here's where we are. It's been 45 minutes getting there, but all of that was important stuff. The question is, we keep coming back to the same question: how do we manage the decline of the U.S. empire, and who manages it? Right now, we have a war going on between the U.S. empire and the rest of the world. The global South, they're all on the side, almost all of Asia, with the exception of a few government, Japan, South Korea, maybe Singapore, that are occupied by the U.S. The rest of Asia is with Russia. All of Latin America, Caribbean, Middle East, Africa, the whole world's with Russia, not China. They're the whole world. Why is that? Because they are in favor of a multipolar world. They're in favor of the disintegration of the unipolar hegemon. And I don't mean disintegration in taking a country apart. I mean in disintegrating the 850 bases around the world, getting rid of that crap, and the U.S. Economic and military power that's used for coercion. So what happens is this: the U.S. is constantly escalating. So people say we're on an escalator. We're constantly escalating in Ukraine. So the only question has to be, who manages the escalation? Well, clearly it's the Russians. So Vladimir Putin is between a rock and a hard place. But from what I've seen of the Putin government, now keep in mind something. My mentor was Paul Robeson Jr., a guy who knew a little teeny bit. He went to school in the Soviet Union, knew a little bit about Russian culture. I've studied Russian culture. I work every day with Russians, a lot of them. I understand Russian culture, and I understand it's very practical, very cautious, moves slow. I understand two things about Vladimir Putin: culturally, how he thinks. I also understand that he's a martial artist, and I understand the pragmatism of martial arts. And what if you are taught self-defense of any kind? What is the goal? What is your instructor going to start off by saying? The goal is to go home. That's the goal at the end of the day, to go home. A bunch of guys say, you're a chump, you're a punk, you're a wuss, Garland. My idea is to go home. Hey, guys, I don't want any trouble. Goodbye. If there's a way for me to exit, I'm gone. Some guy says, yeah, your mother wears combat boots. I'm not. Oh, yeah, well, come on, let's go. The guy could have a knife. It could be a setup. He could have a gun. I could beat the hell out of him today, and he could come back and shoot me tomorrow with a gun. The idea is to go home. Winning without winning. Read Sun Tzu, Winning the Art of War. The idea is not to win many, many great battles. The idea is to achieve your goal without battles. So I understand Putin being a martial artist. He understands the idea is for us to go home at the end of the day. Whereas the neocons are stuck in a escalatory pattern that they don't know what they're doing. These are tactics. Right? There's always another tactic. Hey, the Russians are moving. All right, what do you want to do? Tanks. Tanks it is. Let's do tanks. Tanks, everybody. You got tanks for you. It's like Oprah show. You get a tank. You get a tank. Everybody gets a tank. Right? It's tactics. They're stuck in that. Didn't work. We're still losing. All right, what next? Fighter planes, maybe. Hey, but let's everybody. And oftentimes, the tanks or fighter planes or whatever are only on paper. Hey, we're giving tanks. When? They'll be built in a year or so. What about Germany? 3 to 4 months. Can you get any tanks? Yeah, we got some people that got some old T-42s from World War II in a museum. We'll try to fire them up. Probably can't, but we'll try it. So what you end up with is 150 tanks on paper and a couple dozen in reality. But the people believe it, and you say there's tanks, so you claim that there's an escalation that doesn't even really in the real world exist because you can't get the tanks there. So you've got nothing but tactics. And as Sun Tzu said, the tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So, and let me add this. Let's again go to martial arts. Putin understands this. All right. You're fighting a person, and that person has nunchucks, and they have practice with those nunchucks. They have practice with those nunchucks for year after year. They are deadly with them. You go up against them, and you get hit a couple times, and you turn around to your trainer and say, "What do I do?" And the guy says, "I got a staff. Here's a staff." And you're like, "But I don't know how to use this staff." And you're like, he's like, "I'll train you. Come over here for 5 minutes. You take it here. Here's how you spin it. Here's how you poke a guy. Here's how you do a sweep with a staff. Here's how you do it with a staff. There you go." So now we got a guy who's trained for 10 years with nunchucks and another guy who trained for 10 minutes with a staff. You know what he's going to do? He's going to wrap the nunchucks around the staff. He's going to yank it out of your hand. And now he's going to have a staff and nunchucks. And you're going to be standing there and he's going to beat the hell out of you. So now what are we doing? Oh, well, that didn't work. Here's a knife. But I've never trained with a knife. I got 10 minutes. The guy's going to take your knife and stab you with it, right? What we're doing is we've got people on one side who have trained with the weapons, and the weapons are in many instances are networked with computers, networked with satellites, and they have a battlefield plan and all of this kind of stuff, and they're prepared to fight. On the other side, you got people that are coming up with another weapon. Give this guy a new weapon. What is it? A baseball bat. He could probably hit somebody with that. I've never trained. I've never played baseball. I don't even know which end to grab. We got 10 minutes. We'll train you to swing the baseball bat. You won't really know anything about how to fight with it, but we'll train you how to swing a baseball bat. We'll have you hit a couple of curveballs, and then in you go against this other guy who's been training with his baseball bat for 10 years. What's going to happen? You're going to lose that one. You know what's going to happen? You're going to try to swing for his head. He's going to sweep right into the side of your knee with that baseball bat. See, that's the key. If you got a weapon, right? Everybody thinks you go for the head. You go like that, and you go down, and you come right alongside. I just slapped out. You can't see that. You the fibia, going right down the side of your leg, right below the knee and the ankle. So instead of taking your staff or your baseball bat or whatever and going at the head that everybody thinks, you fake that and you sweep. And imagine what happens when somebody has a staff or a baseball bat or an asp, an expandable asp, and pow, they snap that sucker and they break your tib fib. The fight's over. They don't have to hit your head. Your leg is snapped in half. You have a compound fracture between your knee and your ankle. I don't think you're going to be happy about fighting anymore. You know why? Because that guy's trained to use his ass baton, his staff, his baseball bat. You ain't, you're losing. So now tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat, in the words of Sun Tzu. And somebody wrote a great article about I read recently with that. So that's all we got left is tactics without strategy. So the issue now is not whether or not Russia wins in Ukraine. The issue is how soon, how long, how it ends. We've got now some neocons saying perhaps we should do a deal with Russia. Here's the problem with that. They're neocons. They can't do a deal. They couldn't get the nuclear weapon. This is a neocon deal. Okay, here's the plan. I think it's time for us to work out. You give me everything I want. You do everything I could possibly dream of, as though I won the war. And then we can walk away. Oh, by the way, I've lied to you and cheated on every other deal. So yeah, I'm sure you'll trust me now. Bottom line, what are they going to call this deal? Minsk 3? They might as well do it in Minsk. Let's do Minsk 3. Yeah, but you didn't actually keep the deal that we had on Minsk 1 or 2. Fair enough. But trust us this time. No. They're going to come up with a deal that's going to be lopsided, where Russia does everything they want, leaves, gives them Crimea, Moscow, but all the way, everything from the Black Sea to the Pacific goes to the neocons, and then Russia walks away and basically says, I give, uncle. And you get no deal. Russia don't trust you. The only deal Russia will do is a money in hand deal. You know, as they say in the Black community, put the money in my hand. If you want to deal with me and I don't trust you, the only thing that I will deal with, that I will make, is if you put the money in my hand. I don't want to hear. Yeah, I will. As there used to be in the United States, there was a famous cartoon called Popeye, and in Popeye there was one guy, Wimpy. Wimpy was always begging for hamburgers, and he would say, I will gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today, right? He was never going to pay you. He just wanted a hamburger, right? I'm sorry, man, Russia ain't doing no wimpy hamburger deals. The only deal that will be made is money in my hand. You show me, tell me what you're going to do, and then do it. And then we'll do it. That's the only deal. And the neocons can't do that. I think Russia already knows that. So what Russia, I think, what Putin's trying to do is not just manage the end of the Ukrainian conflict, but to simultaneously, these two things are inextricably linked, to manage the Ukrainian conflict at the same time managing the decline of the US empire, along with China, along with Russia, along with Saudi Arabia. See, that's why there's a diplomatic thing going on here, where these countries are saying, we got to build alternative currencies. We got to build other options. We got to build other military alliances, because they know you can't just defeat the United States there. Right? You got to hurt them in lots of different places. You got to poke them here, poke them there, poke them here. So they want to put some real economic pain on the U.S. and some economic challenges on the U.S. so the U.S. can't just focus on Ukraine and just can't keep escalating on Ukraine. So the neocons are going to try, but at some point, the neocons are going to be between a rock and a hard place also, because the neocons are on their desire for world hegemony, and their billionaire backers who are going to say, time out, don't you get my ass killed in a nuclear war. So I think that's one of the reasons the Russians have been moving slowly, because in moving slowly, they're allowing the things in Ukraine to develop organically. They're allowing the incredible amount of corruption in Ukraine to rot away the Ukrainian government. They're allowing that to happen. Remember, a lot of times winning is not by forcing something to happen. Zen is a lot about allowing things to happen, right? The study of Zen, letting things happen naturally, allowing your opponent to defeat himself. Right? Not always reacting. What happens when somebody, as we say in Zen, you throw a rock down a well and you don't hear a splash? You're kind of surprised, right? So you don't always do, when the US escalates, you may say, yeah, we'll do this or that, but you don't necessarily escalate. They don't hear a splash. Ha, ha, ha. We punched Russia. Now Russia has to escalate. If the US escalates and Russia every single time retaliates in some kind of a way, other than rhetorically, because that's what we see, the US escalates physically, Russia escalates rhetorically, but they keep doing what they're saying. The US is throwing a rock down a well and they're not hearing a splash. They're punching and they're not seeing a bruise. Russia has a plan. We're going to do our plan. Oh yeah, well now we're going to do this. We still got a plan. We're still executing our plan. Oh yeah, well now we're going to do that. Because what the US is trying to do is disrupt Russia's plan by throwing new dynamics into the field. And Russia's saying you can throw all the new dynamics you want in the field. We ain't disrupting our plan. We got a plan. It's slow and steady. We're training people. Oh yeah, we're going to make you attack now. We ain't going to attack until we're ready. We may never attack. We may just keep slowly punching away, keep slowly hitting you with body shots, and allow the corrupt regime to collapse. It wouldn't surprise me if Russia does that. They may have a massive offensive. That's quite possible. But I think if they're going to do the massive offensive, part of what's been going on here is two things. Number one, take your time until your forces are at optimum strength. You've got the number of forces you want in the areas that you want them. You've got the reserves that you want in the areas that you want them. You've got the number of missiles and the number of tanks, and your industrial capacity for war has created the necessary hardware that you need to execute said offensive. Your adversary is sufficiently weak. The corruption in the government has severely weakened the Ukrainian government. And in the eyes of the world, people are starting to look at these people saying, oh, man, we're supporting these guys. This don't look good. So you're allowing your opponent to crumble. You're allowing dynamics to happen. That's a Zen kind of thing. Allow your opponent to screw up, to get weaker. If you're sitting there and watching your opponent getting weaker without you having to do a lot of work, watch them get weaker for a while. I think that's part. Russia is like, yeah, because everybody's like, Russia's training their troops. Remember what we were told at first. They'll be ready by late November, early December. And they may have been. And maybe they could have been. But I think they may have looked at it and said, what's the rush? These morons are falling apart. Think I'll slow things up a little bit and watch the show. And I think that's what they did. They slowed things up a little bit and watched the show. And when they are prepared, if they need to, they will launch a massive offensive. But keep in mind that it could be coming. It may not come. They may look at it and say, let's plan it. And then look at it and say, holy crap, they're falling apart so fast. Hold up on that massive offensive. Whoa, 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 time out. Not quite yet. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I'll tell you when. And that may be a reason. Maybe they're slow walking their preparation and their training. Maybe they decided to slow walk it because ain't no rush when your enemy's falling apart. Then again, it could be this. And all of these are possibilities because we're talking about how you manage the end of this empire and the end of this conflict. What about this? They don't want to attack until they are at optimal strength. If they say, look, man, we got lots of new tanks, but these guys are not going to be ready to it'll take us 3 to 4 months to properly train these guys on these tanks. So they got the tanks, and in November, December, they had the people in basic training, but they said they'll be able to use tanks, but they won't be optimal for, say, 4 months, right? And they say, okay, we got the tanks, we got the tank crew. It's November, December, January, February. 4 months it's going to take for us to train them. No rush. And we ain't going in until they're properly trained because they won't be optimal. See what I mean? So the Russians are A, not in a rush, and B, they can allow their adversary to get weaker. And so if your adversary is getting weaker and you're going to punch your adversary, wait until they're at their weakest. And if they continue to get weaker, at some point you might not have to punch them. Watch them. They get weaker, 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 weaker. They fall on the ground and pass out. You didn't go home. It's game over. Walk over and say, hey, sucks to be you. I didn't have to punch you. Again, Sun Tzu, The Art of War. The art of Bruce Lee, the art of fighting without fighting, the art of winning a battle without a fight, right? Without having to go to war. So I think that the way that the Russians, and that's why I say Putin manages this, is important. And I think they're looking at managing it in a way that there is not a nuclear escalation and a nuclear clash. And I believe that can be done. And it will be done. I believe that unlike, now let me add this, the irresponsible and psychopathic neocons may want to, but they may not be capable. They're scared, but they may not be capable of managing it. And they don't have any empathy at all whatsoever. I believe this. I believe the Russian government and the Chinese government and some of the other governments have a certain level of empathy for humankind. I believe that they have a responsibility, that they understand that what they would be doing is killing 7 billion people. And they're not just going to start throwing nukes, knowing that the US is crazy and they start throwing them and then it's 7 billion people are dead. I think they understand, unlike the neocons, that responsibility. And they understand that their responsibility is to end this conflict without that happen. They actually, this is going to sound crazy, but from what I've seen, it appears to me that the Russian government actually feels like they represent their people, and they feel a responsibility that their job is for the betterment of their country and their people, and destroying it in a nuclear holocaust ain't going to make it better, and it ain't going to make the people happier. And because they understand that responsibility, they understand what I'm saying right now, that they are facing psychopaths without empathy, incompetent, bungling idiots who probably don't really want a nuclear war and don't want to die, but are not competent enough to manage their own decline. And since they can't manage their decline, I suspect that Putin and his crew are going to look at it as their job. And I think they can do it. I really believe they can do it. And I believe the way they're doing it, the evidence that I have is because they're moving slow. Now, somebody else says U.S. false flag will get it started. Well, it ain't just that easy. Not to mention, keep this. That implies that the U.S. wants to go to war with Russia and start a nuclear war. They don't really want to do that. They don't want to do that. That's not, the neocons understand they don't want to die. People may think they want to die. Nah, Bill Gates, you think he wants to die? Elon Musk, you think think about this. Do you really believe that Joe Biden is in charge here? That he has the final say? Do you really think that the Bezoses of the world and the Bill Gateses of the world and the Warren Buffetts of the world and the Soroses of the world, for all of their evil thoughts, do you think that they ain't pulling this guy around like a puppet? You think they want to really just die like that? No, they want to live forever. So no, the idea that the U.S. is just a suicidal maniacs, I don't believe that, because the people who control the Bidens and et cetera actually do want to live, but they're incompetent, which could create a dynamic where they don't. But I think their adversaries, using that word with air quotes, are competent enough to manage the decline of the U.S. empire, because it's Ukraine's going to collapse. And the Russians are letting it collapse. And what they're doing too also is they're poking at the foundation. Rather than crush Ukraine, which they could, they're just going to keep poking at the foundation for a while, poking at the foundation until Ukraine is in collapse. Now, it's possible that when Ukraine is in free fall, that's when they make their move offensively, when Ukraine is in free fall. And the other thing is how Russia manages its relationship with Europe. One of the things that the Russians, I think, have recognized, and we'll get towards the end of this video, is they understand that Europe is that the European countries are victims, are hostages of NATO. They are not members of NATO, and bit by bit, some of them are learning the same thing. And I think the Russians realize if they can maintain just a minor bit of detente with the Europeans, the Europeans may hate them, they may be racist, anti-Russian bastards, but for the purposes of their long-term diplomatic health of the world, that there may be a possibility that as the Europeans start to wake up and realize they're getting the hell beat out of them by the US, and they start drift away, they're going to be looking for a place to go. Again, at some point, it is my belief, may not be today, may not be 5 years today, maybe 20 years from today, the Europeans are going to recognize that they have a much more stable economic and diplomatic and military partner in Russia than they do the US, because the Russia is not acting in a way that's malicious towards the Europeans in a way that the US is. Now, don't get me wrong, the Russians will never be in love with them. They'll never trust them again. They've seen who they are. But the Russians are practical, and they'll say, once the Europeans start to drift away from the US, which is in the best interest of the Russians and the Chinese and the rest of the world, they're going to be looking for somewhere to go. And the Russians will give them a soft landing. They'll say, look, guys, all right, we'll sell you certain commodities. We will kind of get our embassy straight. We don't have to be friends, but we will maintain a reasonable relationship, because it will be in their best interest to do so. And the Russians are practical, and they're not going to be, we're mad at the Europeans. Yeah, they will be mad at the Europeans, but they're very practical, and they'll realize as the Europe eventually, inevitably drifts away from this malicious empire that's abusing and using them, that at some point they're going to need a landing spot. And Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, Africa, etc., is going to be building a powerful economic base. And the Europeans are going to be like, I'm looking at the US and I see a bunch of homeless encampments and idiots, and somebody's 31 trillion in debt and we're in debt. And I'm looking over here at some people who got gas and oil and industry and markets that we can sell stuff to. Hey guys, how you doing? Hope we weren't out of line with all that anti-Russian stuff. Perhaps we can talk. And I believe that Russia and China are going to be ready to talk. And let me add one more thing to finish this off before I go to super chats. China and Russia are in this thing together, and India, because India knows that they aspire to be a world power, and so the US would take them out. The US is going to have a problem. And here's the problem. We will dispense with Russia, we'll take them apart, and then we'll go after China, right? When they get finished with, when the Russian bear gets finished pawing and clawing and mangling their behind, they ain't going to be in much of a position to fight anybody. B, their rest of the world, the Europeans are going to be so beat down, so hurt, so torn apart, new leadership all over the place, that NATO alliance that they're going to need to drag along to confront China is not going to be there. That the Europeans are going to be like, dude, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, as George Bush said, well, you can't get fooled again, right? And there is no lesson to be learned from getting kicked twice by the same mule. This conflict is going to wipe out. I just don't see how NATO survives. It may survive in name, but in effectiveness, it's done. And Russia's very, very powerful. They're building a powerful military. And what's going to happen is this. The U.S. is now going to go milk the Europe like a cow, and they're going to say, we need all your money. Look how powerful the Russian military is. You got to build up your military, buy all of our stuff. And they're just going to drain Europe dry. And Europe's not. First of all, their people are going to be furious when they realize how much they've been had. They won't trust their leaders. They'll replace a lot of them. The ruling elite will be fully discredited as they are now, but even more so. And there just will not be the will to join them in another one of these mad crusades to save the empire and destroy them. Because if you think going after Russia wiped out Europe, going after China would make this look like a Saturday afternoon party. All right, let's take a look. This was a lot of fun. Isn't it odd that I said that was fun? Now, I enjoy running off at the mouth. Let's hit the super chats. You know what? I'm going to do it the opposite. I'm going to go all the way to the top. Holy moly, we got 28 people, 2,800 people. We're going to go all the way to the top, and we're going to start with super chats. All right, let's go. I think there may be. All right, we'll start with this one. Sparky, great Sparky. Putin is an anti-globalist hero. I'd have to agree with you, Spark. Michael Frustaglio, super sticker. Thanks a lot, Michael. Certainly appreciate that. We got questions. We got Bruce Moore says thanks. All right, thanks a lot, Bruce. Vasca Tamir, thanks a lot. Sparky again says universes are galaxies. You're right, galaxies, Sparky. Galaxies, 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 galaxies. The universe is the big picture. Thanks a lot. I can always count on Sparky to drag me back to philosophical and astronomical reality. Let's go next. If Mexico were to invite Russia and China to build bases just south of the U.S. border, what would the United States do? Exactly what Russia's done. Yeah, exactly. But keep in mind something. When you bring up that point, it implies that the U.S. sees itself as a nation. It doesn't. It sees itself as the Lord, as the God over the world that presides over the order. So no, Russia or no one else could challenge us anywhere in the world. A name that I can't pronounce. Thank you very much. How about we go to Rinston? If we live in empire, how do we make a democracy? Well, you know, here's the thing about it. Things will be will be changing. Things will be changing. Every empire craps out at some point. And whether or not it'll become a democracy, I don't know what it'll become. It ain't one now. Sparky, like the old Fair and Young song, live fast, love hard, die young, and leave a beautiful memory. There you go. I'm certainly going to enjoy my life. And I suggest we all do today. Oh boy. Yo, Garland, love you, man. Will Z and Putin shake hands in Dallas? Good question. I'll put it like this. At some point, Biden better stay out of Dallas and convertibles, because it looks like he got some enemy. Serge says, how about those fanatics, Garland, who want to be raptured? They are all too happy to speed up the end time. Yeah, we got that whole people in the Israel thing and the religious crazies. Jura Maladits, the Zionists who believe that the Israel has to come to power and then the world will end, yay, and then the Israelis will all either become Christians and be killed. What kind of allies you got there, Israel? Those are good allies, trust me. Gregory V, thanks a lot, GV. Gregory V. I'm looking next. Lover of the Russian team, super sticker. Thanks a lot. A lot of people don't have questions today, but that's fine. Anybody has any questions, I'll answer them. Excellent as usual, Garland. Your tweets are fire. Thanks a lot. You know, I'm just enjoyed tweeting. It's just that's my art, right? My art is words. That's my way of saying things that I need to say. Stuff just comes out. I don't tweet it. Like Bruce Lee said, you don't kick, the kick jumps out. You don't punch, the punch jumps out by itself, right? I don't tweet. The tweets just go by themselves. Whoa. Love the show, my brother. I believe the issue of Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and eventually Iran to BRICS will expedite the end of the empire. The rest of the world is rejecting the Western America. Debo, the Black Panther. You are correct, my Debo. You are 100% correct. Excellent comment. Let's keep going. I just saw Lima Lisowska, crazy prediction. Kanye becomes resident. I think you mean president, but resident. There we go. He might become resident too. All right. We got a couple people over on Rockfin, and my Rockfin friends always have very intellectual and brilliant things to say. That's weird. Rockfinch does countdowns every now. I'm a Russian-born Canadian. That's weird. Rockfinch just started doing the countdown again. I wonder if I accidentally did something that I shouldn't do. Okay, I'm a Russian-born Canadian. Unfortunately, I'm not as confident as you that Putin will save anything. If anything, he will destroy something we hate. But that actually plays well into the Klaus Fourth Industrial Reich. I have little faith in the KGB lawyer who did WEF, YGL, Russ China versus US, MB, another false binary like red and blue. Yeah, well, you know what? Thanks a lot. That's a certainly, guess what? I'm a person who thinks that it is important to bring voices into a conversation that disagrees. I think the healthiest conversation is when a bunch of people are in a room and somebody says, hey, we all agree, and some guy in the back of the room or girl sticks their hand up and says, I think you're all wrong. I think it's important to bring that person to the front of the room and everybody should hear what they have to say. So I certainly appreciate MTL_Momzilla, who says, nah, Garland, you're wrong. Thanks a lot. Greatest comment I could possibly have. The healthiest comment we could have are those who say, I disagree, and here's why. Analogy precious as usual. Great seeing you back, says BH Longboo. All right. Ronnie Graham says both Russia and China have hyper-fast missiles. If they can, they should proactively destroy the U.S. military and not wait for the U.S. neocons' timetable. Could that not be the best way to save the planet from the hell that might await us? Nah, don't start a fight with a madman. Again, as I said, somebody's saying, I hate you, or Garland, I hate you. The idea is to go home. I'm not going to fight this person unless I have to. Hey, man, I don't want any trouble. Now I'm going to put my hands up. That gives me the ability to take action if I want to. I can grasp, I can punch, I can block, I can do all kinds of things with my hands up. I have set up a perimeter, right? But I don't want to aggressively attack you unless I know you're going to attack me beyond a reasonable doubt to a moral certainty, or you've backed me into a corner, then yes. But other than that, so I disagree with a preemptive attack. That's the kind of stuff that the U.S. Empire does. But they won't do it against a big guy like Russia. Lynn Bowers, thank you a lot. Any other questions? All right, I think we got a couple more super chats that might have plopped up while I wasn't there. I saw one. Kanye will become president of the USA. Yes, you are correct. President Kanye. That's funny. Super sticker, gutter worm. Thank you very much. I think that's it, my dear and fluffy friends. I believe that's it. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. As always, you see everything scrolling across the bottom. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. Thanks for taking your time out. I would ask everyone, we got 2,589 people. Please, can we make sure we have 2,589 likes, even if you have to go to my YouTube channel and go there to like it. Everybody, please make sure, if you can afford to support the channel, that's great. If you can't, don't spend the money on yourself. If you can't afford it, of course, we got PayPal. Buy me a coffee is always great if you don't like PayPal or anything like that. Buy me or patreon.com. If you can do $3, $5, or $1 million a month, whatever you can do is great. And of course, my Cash App is information, everything scrolling across the bottom. It is critical. It is important that you become a member at my Rockfin channel, ROKFIN, rockfin.com/Garland Nixon, because inevitably I may say something that gets me thrown off Twitter, and you can go to Rockfin. Rockfin doesn't cost a dime, and they have no advertisements. Just like Twitter, only better, no advertisements. So please go to Rockfin. Let me end by saying this. We want to keep Rockfin on the air if you can afford it. The way Rockfin stays on the air, free, everybody becomes there. It's free. But there is an option to become a subscriber, and that is $14.99 a month. And if you sign up for a year, they give you a couple months free. So it ends up being $9.99 a month if you sign up for a year. And what that does, it keeps this free speech platform on the air. So if you can afford to be a subscriber for Rockfin, keep a free speech platform on the air, please make sure you do that. If you can't, just become a free subscriber. There is one advantage to being a paid subscriber. All content creators on Rockfin, if you listen to me, you know the story. All content creators on Rockfin do at least one premium video per week for subscribers only. Mine is every Wednesday morning from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time with the one and only Scott Ritter. I do about 15 minutes on all my channels, and then the rest is exclusive for subscribers on Rockfed. So that's the whole story. Thanks a lot. You see everything scrolling across the bottom. If you can afford to help the channel, great. If you can't, spend the money on your family. Eggs are expensive. Thank you very much, everybody. And I am out. Also, oh, one last thing. So I love to write. And actually, I'm a pretty good writer, believe it or not. Better than I am at running my stinking yap. But I enjoy writing. So I've got a Substack account, and I got a couple of articles up there that I've already written, but I'm going to start putting Substack articles up about various things. So go ahead, and if you can, go to my Substack account, Garland Dixon. I think it's Political Superfood or something. Go find my Substack account and sign up. I'm going to get that going. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day.